Okay, picture this. It's August 1947. A newly independent India steps completely free from colonial rule. But they aren't stepping into a peaceful new dawn. They are walking directly into a massive storm of unprecedented crises. Welcome to The Explainer, where we're going to break down the absolutely monumental challenges of India's early nation building. Let's dive in.
We're starting off with this incredible piece of history, a headline capturing the absolute optimism of that midnight hour. It's the literal front-page evidence of Jawaharlal Nehru's famous tryst with destiny and the official end of 200-year-old British rule. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph.
But, that pure joy didn't last long without a heavy dose of reality. As Mahatma Gandhi soberly noted right before independence, the arrival of the freedom they had fought so hard for would be a day of rejoicing, for sure, but also a day of deep mourning. It perfectly frames the duality of August 1947.
So, to really unpack this immediate threat to national unity, we're going to hit four main areas today: the midnight hour, the broad challenges they faced, the deep trauma of partition, and finally, the massive puzzle of the princely states.
All right, diving right into Section 1, the midnight hour. India was born into circumstances that were arguably more difficult than literally any other newly independent nation at the time.
What's actually super interesting here is that despite all the differing, loud voices in the national movement, almost everyone agreed on two foundational goals. First, establish a democratic government, and second, ensure that government works for the good of all, especially the socially disadvantaged. This wasn't just political rhetoric, it was the universally accepted promise of freedom.
Moving on to Section 2, the three broad challenges. To actually pull off that promise of freedom, the new leadership had three massive hurdles staring them right in the face.
While establishing democracy and making sure there was economic equality were obviously vital, it was that first step, forging unity amidst massive continental diversity, that was the immediate existential crisis. I mean, many observers globally genuinely believed a country with such varied languages, cultures, and religions couldn't possibly survive as a single state.
That brings us to Section 3, the trauma of partition. We really have to take a solemn look at the unprecedented violence and displacement that came right alongside freedom. It wasn't just lines on a map. Survivors described it as a literal division of hearts.
So what caused this? Well, it essentially boils down to the massive political clash of the 1940s. The Muslim League pushed the two-nation theory, arguing that Hindus and Muslims were distinct peoples who needed totally separate nations. Now, Congress strongly opposed this, but British political maneuvering ultimately made partition an unavoidable reality.
The sheer scale of what happened next is just staggering. We're talking about an estimated 80 lakh people. That's 8 million people forced to migrate in an abrupt, completely unplanned transfer. Imagine millions undertaking incredibly dangerous journeys, mostly on foot, heading toward a totally uncertain future.
And tragically, the human cost was beyond comprehension. Somewhere between 5 to 10 lakh lives were lost in the severe communal violence that just erupted everywhere. Entire, vibrant cities like Lahore, Amritsar, and Kolkata were fractured into rigid communal zones. Crossing the wrong street could literally be lethal.
And the split was so absolute, it was a logistical nightmare that went way beyond dividing provinces or financial assets. They divided everything. I mean literally everything, down to government chairs, typewriters, paper clips. They even divided the railway employees and the musical instruments of the police band. All of this is happening while they're trying to manage an unprecedented refugee crisis. Crazy, right?
But behind all that administration were the actual human beings. Millions had fled to refugee camps, facing abduction and terrible violence. It's really striking to think that while the country celebrated its newly won freedom in the capital, its founding father was miles away, walking through riot-torn areas, desperately pleading for peace.
Now here's a crucial takeaway you should keep in mind. Despite the mass migration, India still retained a massive minority population, with Muslims making up 10 to 12% of the population in 1951 alongside millions from other faiths. The new government faced the monumental task of somehow maintaining a secular, inclusive fabric after such severe communal trauma.
All right, on to our final piece, Section 4, integrating the princely states. This was the second half of that massive unity challenge, and honestly, the ultimate geopolitical puzzle.
First, we kind of have to define a legal concept here, paramountcy. Basically, under colonial rule, princely states accepted British supremacy over their internal affairs. But the very minute the British left, this paramountcy lapsed, meaning overnight, these states became legally independent.
Just imagine the sheer panic. A newly united India is suddenly facing the prospect of 565 individual princely states, choosing to either remain independent or join Pakistan. This accounted for 1/3 of the land area of the British Indian Empire. If these states didn't join the Union, India wouldn't be a nation. It'd just be a heavily fragmented landmass.
So how did they fix it? Well, Deputy Prime Minister Sardar Patel stepped up and navigated this absolutely brilliantly. He walked a total tightrope of firm diplomacy. He recognized that the citizens actually wanted to join India. He offered flexible regional autonomy where needed, but he held absolutely firm on one thing. Consolidating the nation's territorial boundaries post-partition was non-negotiable.
Through a lot of peaceful negotiations, most of the bordering states signed what's called an instrument of accession. It's basically a formal, legal handshake agreeing to merge their territories into India, though it's worth noting that places like Junagadh, Hyderabad, Kashmir, and Manipur required much more complex resolutions.
Which leaves us with a really profound question to wrap up this explainer. Considering the two-nation theory was explicitly rejected by the new leadership, how would this newly forged, deeply traumatized nation secure its secular and democratic future? They were handed a country physically scarred by religious division. Navigating that massive contradiction? Well, that would become the ultimate test of independent India's character. Thanks so much for exploring this deeply foundational chapter of history with me.